welcome back to the University of Huddersfield, Sir George Buckley. How does it feel to be back?
Well, it's fun. It's like coming home, clearly. You know, I have a long history here, not only being a student here, but I've been closely involved with the university on a number of different occasions, a number of different things. So it feels very comfortable, very much like coming home.
Well, speaking of your history here, you graduated with a Bachelor in Science and Electronic Engineering from the University of Huddersfield in 1972, followed by acquiring your PhD in Engineering in 1976. How do you feel your time spent here at Huddersfield has helped you in your future career?
Well, Bob said this earlier in his oration. I think in many ways this was the place that made me what I became ultimately, because I had a real passion for learning, because I'd been devoid of learning in many ways. And so to come to a place where the teaching was really, really great and the people seemed to care about me as a student, that they genuinely wanted me to do well. It really felt warm, non-threatening. I was a bit frightened still because I was still early in my career. But yes, of course what you always do is you remember some of the special teachers. People like Jack Priestley, who sadly passed away, Dennis Brooks, who was a fabulous teacher, Keith Pratt. So you remember the people. It's about the people, and of course your fellow students, Stan Gathercole, Malcolm Davidson, people like that. You know, the boys. We had no girls in our class, unfortunately, but so it's about the memories, about the people, and the memories are very, very fond.
During your career, you've worked all over the world. What would you say are the key benefits and challenges of working and living in different countries around the world?
The short answer to the question is diversity. Now, but I don't mean necessarily in the straight political sense of the word diversity. What's really fun, it's a real learning experience to hear the viewpoints of other people from different countries on the same kind of topics. Now that might be a science topic, but it might be a political topic, it might be a social topic. And so over the years, it's something I've done a lot of. So for example, I'll just give you an example. When I first went to 3M, we had a group called Executive Conference. They were the people that were the highest paid people in the company. When I got there were 44% of them were non-American. So the other were Americans. When I left, it was 82 were non-American. And I really loved the idea of contributions from people who, it wasn't that they were different to me, but they didn't think like me. They had different perspectives on the same thing. I thought, that's interesting, never thought about it that way. So I think there's a sort of a richness that comes out of these experiences that you would never normally get if you were, monotheistic, mono-national, mono-language. You just wouldn't get that. So, and then eventually, not only do you thrive on it, you want it. And so it's a great seed corn, shall we say, to diversity. I just absolutely loved it. And now I can't even think of doing anything different. Why would I not be with people who are foreign, not be with people who are from a different gender class to me? Why would not? It's great.
Great.
And as Kissinger said, it happens to have the additional benefit of being true.
Now, you inspire our students here at Huddersfield, but we'd like to know who's inspired you during your life?
I think the people who inspired me were the people that went before me. One of the down products of today Britain, as against maybe Britain 40 years ago or 100 years ago, is we don't have quite as many heroes here in Britain anymore. We had lots of heroes in the past. So of course I'm a great student of history, so I was clearly inspired by some of the people you'll know well, Lord Nelson, Duke of Wellington. Oddly enough, Napoleon, which some people may find a little strange. He was a great administrator and a great general. The fact he lost in the end is, in a sense, only one step along the way. But separate from that, most of the other inspirers were people who were scientists. So David Hilbert, Henri Poincaré, James Clerk Maxwell, Newton, obviously, as probably most people would be, and Oliver Heaviside, who's a less well-known engineer. These are the kind of people that I see the contributions they make, and I just think, boy, I hope one day I can make something like that, do something like that.
Yeah.
And when you try to get to know them as individuals, because I read a lot of biographies, I'm reading yet another one on Einstein right now, and you get to know people as people, named as people, and you get to see the decency of the vast majority of them. And so when you translate from a name, a kind of an idea, a set of accomplishments, and you read the biography and you get to read about these people, that's when it really becomes inspiring.
Yeah. Since you studied here in the 1970s, a lot has changed here at the University of Huddersfield. Yes. What is your fondest memory of your time here as a student?
Probably, of course, you're in a class and you're always, I was certainly always, I was like I'm not sure the right way to describe it. I was tempted to use one phrase just then, and I think it would be wrong. But I was utterly obsessed with learning. So just the sheer ability to consume these things that were mysterious before and now are clear after, delivered by these wonderful teachers like Jack Priestley, like Mike Lewis, like Mike Ingleby, and many others, like Dennis Brooke, like Keith Pratt. That's one thing. But of course, it's some of the relationships that you make with your student friends. So I had a man called Stan Gathercold. So Stan and I became great friends. I worked alone in the first year, because when you come to college in the first year, you don't really know which end is up. What's the best way to do this? What's the best way to do that? And just before we came back to college, Stan called me up or wrote to me. I don't remember how he got a hold of me, but he said, would you like to share studying? If truth be known, I didn't really want to do it, because I was actually, at least according to the numbers, a better student than Stan. So I thought, oh, this is going to go bad. I'm going to become Stan's teacher, So, but I didn't know how to say no without offending him. So I tried it, and it was absolutely true. In the first 3 or 4 weeks, I was Stan's tutor. But then what happened is, just gradually, as Stan got to see my way of working, and I got to see his way of working, it was wonderful. And from that time onward, for the rest of my college days, I was inseparable from Stan. He made me a better student, unquestionably, and I hope I made him a better student. And so you notice today I use the word study buddy. Stan was my study buddy. So probably more than any other single person, Stan affected me in my study habits and in the diligence of making sure all the work was done on time. So he became my very, very dear friend, and he's still my dear friend to this day.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It's really about the people. It's not about the stuff. It's not about the buildings. It's not about. It's about how people treat you, the memories of the teachers, and being a teacher is not easy. When you think about, you see hundreds of students come across your desk, your area in a year, and maybe thousands upon thousands in a lifetime. And to have the tenacity and have the will, have the courage, have the diligence to try to expend all that effort in changing the mind of this young person in a very positive way. It's a highly underrated activity, and it's call it a gift from God, if you want, that you could teach others. I think it's a wonderful profession, and so it's really all about the people. College is about the people.
Yeah.
Life is about people.
So look into the future. We've looked at your past up to now. Look into the future. We've got the Sir George Buckley Leadership Centre here, which was officially launched last year, and it'll see the development of our future leaders. What key characteristics do you think makes an excellent leader?
Well, courage, charisma, knowledge, wisdom, communications capability, that ability to inspire people who are not inspired, get them to lift their performance, might not necessarily be military, but in all kinds of ways, in all walks of life, in industry. Leaders are people that always seem to have that hard to define capability of doing what's right at the right time. And leading is a privilege and a responsibility and an obligation. So if you have the privilege of leading a group of people, you have the obligation to do your level best to help them in all walks, whether it's getting resources for them, helping with the objectives. And you have another obligation, which is to come across, yes, partly as an oracle, but when you have a conversation with someone like the one we're having today, all great conversations are sometimes you get to be teacher and sometimes you get to be student. And they're the very best interactions you can have with people because, again, life, companies, educational institutes, the Women's Institute or whatever it would be, it's always about people. It's always about people.
If you could give one piece of advice to our students, what would it be?
One piece of advice. Of course, I want to give two pieces of advice, don't I? But if you're going to limit myself to one piece of advice, it would be a passage from the Bible, and it's actually St. Paul, if you're Catholic, Apostle Paul, if you're not, giving his advice to one of the congregations that he'd founded in Asia Minor when they were troubled and didn't know what to do next. He said, "Keep your eyes on the prize." So when you're struggling with a course, when you're struggling with a teacher, when you're struggling with money, when you're struggling with a problem at home, you've got to see beyond and keep your eyes on the prize. Yeah. I've got lots of other things I could say about it, but you wanted me to just restrict myself to one.
And as a Yorkshireman, what do you miss most about God's own country?
What I miss most, the question is, it's probably 6 or 8 things. Before, recently, it was Yorkshire tea bags. And you may think that's kind of odd, but I was raised in my grandmother's house, and I just absolutely love a good cup of tea. Talk about quintessential English I am, or quintessential Yorkshire. I think if it wasn't the tea, it would be the history, the beauty of the countryside. Britain is in a very, very unusual place in the sense that it has, in a relatively small area, has so many different geographies. If you go to Lake District, it's up right into the tall hills. It's just magnificent. If you go to the Yorkshire Dales, it's gorgeous. If you go into the Cotswolds, it's beautiful in yet a different way. If you go down into the Atlantic coast in Cornwall, it's just magnificent. So it's a very odd place, and even in places that some people might not find interesting. But I love the Fens, so Cambridgeshire, Lincolnshire, Norfolk, Suffolk, the beauty, and much of it unspoiled, because it's not necessarily a popular place to go. So that's what I would miss about God's own country. And what happens when you've lived in other countries? For a while, you're homesick, and it's only when you've got everything in balance that you see the merits of both places. So, for example, whenever you move, whether if you moved from here to Kent, you'd always see the bad stuff at the beginning. It's, where's the dentist? Is it a good school for the kids? Or I don't know my way to the market. Or Did you see that front room, all these painting? Where are we going to find somebody to do that? Or the plot. So all the stuff that you don't know about occurs initially, the frustrations. But then when you've been there a while, that gradually settles down. You find the dentist, you find the doctor, you find the good shops. You find out where things are a bit cheaper. Of course, I would feel that, wouldn't I, being a Yorkshireman? So I think that I'm now at the place where I'm always at home. I've lived in a number of different places in the US, and each feel like home to me. I've lived in Maidstone, I've lived in Sheffield, I've lived in Huddersfield, and worked in many different cities, but I think in the end, in the north is where my home really, I feel most at home here with northern people. They're like me, I suppose. So we like things that are familiar.